When I ask religious people if they believe in heaven or hell, the answer is yes. If I ask that same person if they believe in ghosts, they usually reply, no. I always had a hard time comprehending that. I mean, you believe this beautiful white light that takes you to a magical place in the sky where you meet the God who created us all, gives you everlasting life, filled with all your friends and family who have gone before you. You believe in a fiery pit that leads you to the depths of the earth where pain and punishment are bestowed on you for eternity. But when asked if they believe in ghosts or spirits who wander the earth, it's the most absurd thing that they've ever heard. I don't get it. Some think the human spirit travels to either heaven or hell when they die, but it's incomprehensible to think the human spirit can stay behind on earth if they choose. Don't get me wrong, I hope to go to a better place, and this crazy ride we call life is just a test for everyone. Otherwise, I'll be very disappointed. I'm just saying, this can't be it. It was the winter of 2001, and my husband and I were in the market for a home. We were tired of the apartment life with noisy neighbors and not enough storage space. We looked at a few places, but we fell in love with one place in particular that was charming, spacious, and had a big enough yard for our son to play in. We put in an offer, and it was quickly accepted. The papers were drafted within a few days, and I was excited to sign on the dotted line and claim my new home. It was a cold -32 degrees Celsius that night. We started moving our belongings from our apartment to our new home. I covered my plants in exotic roses in plastic and quickly ran them to and from the truck so they wouldn't have to endure the blistering cold for too long. Unfortunately, they didn't survive the move, but I guess neither would you if you were naked, wrapped in plastic, and out in -32-degree weather. We arrived at the new house and unloaded boxes, moved in a few pieces of furniture, made a small fire in the old wood stove, and cranked the furnace. By the time all of that was done, we were exhausted and decided to stay the night instead of driving back to the apartment to sleep. The next morning, we woke up early and immediately started hauling the last of our belongings. It didn't take long to make it look and feel like a new home. And we had the bare minimum in the apartment since we were strapped for space. And when we had everything set up in the new house, it looked like we had nothing. We knew we would have to buy another couch set for the large addition and probably some new plants for the second living room. I walked around, admiring our spacious new home and figuring out where to hang paintings, arrange furniture, and organize the kitchen. I was loving my new home because it was the first time in my life I owned something. It was mine. It belonged to me. Or so I thought. It was only the third night in our house when the first occurrence happened. I was in my bedroom when I sleepily woke up to roll from my side to my back. As I was getting my head comfortable on the pillow, I glanced up to see the outline of a man floating over me. It was like I was looking into a full-length mirror. I couldn't make out a face, and the body seemed to be missing from the hips down. It stared at me, and I stared back, as if we were studying each other. I didn't feel any fear, probably because I was too tired to care, so I eventually closed my eyes and fell back to sleep. The next day I woke up, instantly remembered the floating man, and was sure it was only a dream. I guess when you're settling into a new home, it's always kind of creepy getting used to the creaks and cracks of the new surroundings, and I thought nothing of it. Over the next few days, I received phone calls from my friends that a large wolf was sleeping under my car, but every time I went out to look, there was nothing there. Then one night, I opened the front door to see a small face staring at me. I called my husband to come see, and there was a large husky, face painted white with frost from the northern chill, sitting on our porch. We tried on a few occasions to make her come inside. Then one night the cold proved too much, and she came in to sit by the warm fire. That was it. From then on, she wasn't leaving. She found her permanent family. Her sheer size made me uncomfortable. I wasn't sure of her temperament. Turns out she was very gentle and loving. The veterinarian said she was about 10 years old and in rough shape. It looked like she had been beaten pretty badly, and we figured someone abandoned her not far from our place. We got her shots, bought her a bed and a new diamond collar, registered with the town, and spoiled her rotten. Just a note for the person who beat that beautiful, gentle animal. Remember that fiery pit we spoke of earlier? Pretty sure you'll be going there. I put her bed in our room so she could be our protector, but it didn't last long. I'm not sure what happened, but after 2 nights she left the room in the middle of the night and never slept in there again. She wouldn't even enter the room anymore. If she needed water or food, and I was in the bedroom, she would stand in the doorway and look at me until I got up to follow her. One day I managed to coax her into my bedroom with beef jerky and close the door. I sat on the bed to see what she would do. She sat against the door and started panting heavily. She started to look stressed, so I opened the door to let her out, and she took off. And when I say took off, I mean as fast as an old dog could go. I put her comfy bed in the living room under the bay window, and that's where she slept. I felt good knowing she was there to scare away the burglars and hooligans causing mischief in the neighborhood. In the night, I could hear the clip-clop of her nails on the hardwood floors as she did her perimeter check to make sure the house was secure. I could hear loud licking sounds coming from her water dish just before she was going to settle back down. About a month after adopting our new house guest, another guest arrived. The only difference was this one was not invited. It was hands down the scariest and creepiest thing I had ever happened to me. I'd woken up to change my sleeping position, but before I moved, I quickly glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was shortly after 1 a.m. I was lying on my back, yawning quietly, and my husband was on his side with his back toward me. All of a sudden, I started to hear this scraping sound on the carpet coming from the foot of the bed. It was the most sinister sound I've ever heard. It was as if someone was trying to pull themselves along the rug as if they had no legs or was wounded. I immediately had a flashback to the half-body floating above me shortly after we moved in. I knew now it wasn't a dream. I could hear the nails of its hands digging into the carpet fibers and the palms slapping down hard, as if to get a grip to pull itself. It then started moving. I could hear it pivot around the corner of the mattress and start to make its way along the side of the bed, heading towards the nightstand. I was so terrified I couldn't even move my elbow, which was an inch away from my husband's back, to try and nudge him awake. I reasoned with myself and said it was just the dog doing a belly crawl or carpet surfing, and slowly started to peek over the side of the bed. At that moment, I heard the clip-clop of nails at the end of the hallway and my dog having a drink of water. But the scraping sound was still to be heard in the room. I became still, and it became apparent the dog wasn't in the room. It certainly was something else. My heart was pounding so hard as I froze and thought for sure my husband would wake up to its loud thumping. I let out a small gasp to try and catch my breath, and the sound stopped just short of the nightstand, which was only 2 feet away from me. It was almost as if it decided not to move because it knew I was there. I waited a few minutes, but couldn't work up the courage to find out what was quietly laying on the floor beside my bed. After I talked myself down, I pulled the covers over my head like a frightened child hiding from a monster in the closet, and eventually fell asleep around 3 a.m. I told my husband about it, but he brushed it off, as all husbands do in every ghost story. He said it was the dog or a dream. Anyway, when the sun came up later that morning, I dashed for the bathroom, as I held my bladder all night. After my much-needed relief, I went back to my room to investigate. I wanted to see if there were claw marks on the rug or if anything was under the bed. I found nothing. For a few weeks, I wouldn't get up to use the washroom at night. I was afraid it would come back and grab my ankle from under the bed with its huge nails as soon as my feet hit the floor, or it would be waiting for me around the corner in a long, dark hallway. It took me a very long time to feel comfortable sleeping in the room again, but with time, my memory let it go, and life went on in the house. The little things didn't bother me, just irritated me. I would shut off the lights in the bedroom or the dining area, and when I returned, they'd be on again. I know without a doubt I shut off the lights when I leave a room because I like to save on power. When you live in the north and have to pay for propane to heat your home during the long, cold winter months, you try to save money wherever you can. Propane is not cheap by any means. Whatever was there kept messing with my washing machine as well. I would load the machine, add the powder, close the lid, and I would go on with my house chores, always keeping an ear out to hear if the machine was still making noise. Sure enough, halfway through the cycle, the machine would stop. I would make my way back to the laundry room, and the lid would be wide open. I would close it, walk out slowly, keeping it in my peripheral vision in case it happened again. One day I just looked up and asked politely, "Could you please stop?" It stopped for a couple of weeks, but it started up again. Wishful thinking. One morning my son woke up and said during the night he heard a sound at the foot of his bed. It sounded like a fan or a humming noise. He said the closest he could describe it was someone turned on a hairdryer in the distance and it was just floating in midair. It never happened again. Nothing really happened to my son in the house, but his room must have had a different vibe, as the dog wouldn't go in there. I always had an uneasy feeling in his room, but nothing over the top ever occurred. I remember one night my husband was snoring and my son was at a sleepover, so I decided to take advantage of the situation and crawl into my son's bed to try and get a good night's sleep. I tossed and turned for a bit, then dozed off. A few hours later, I woke up with my back towards the door. I had an eerie feeling someone was standing beside the closet watching me, but I remained still and stared at the wall. If there was something there, my mind came up with a plan to trick it. I closed my eyes to pretend I was just moving in my sleep and slowly rolled over to face the opposite end of the room. I was still for a few minutes and bravely opened my eyes just enough to scope out the room. I didn't see anything, but could feel something there standing by the closet, which I had to pass by to get to the door. I got the shivers and made a quick decision to get out of the room and crawl back into the bed with my snoring husband. Sometimes during the morning hours, I would wake up to 3 loud knocks above my headboard. It sounded as someone was knocking at a door that had a huge brass knocker, creating an echoing boom. It kept happening during the winter, and each time I would jump, rub my eyes, and look around the room. I thought it was something outside running between the shed and the house. I went out to investigate a few times but came up with nothing. No animals, no nests, no tracks. I assumed I was dreaming it all, but eventually I got fed up with the knocking and moved my bed to the opposite side of the room under the window. It didn't help. I woke up again to the knocking sound above my headboard, but now it was also rattling the window. I finally shouted one morning, "Okay, I'm up, I'm up." The knocking subsided, but oddly enough, it started happening more on Saturdays when I was trying to sleep in. It would never let me sleep beyond 10 in the morning. I guess that was my cue to get out of bed. Keep watching for part 2.